Hello, Dr. Lonsrich here, and I'm going to give a long lecture on reproduction and development. So there'll be a break between reproduction and development if you don't want to sit through the length of this lecture, which might be 20-some minutes long. All right, so reproduction, development. Those are the two themes for today. We begin with flowers, plants. And so some terminology and flowering types that I want you to know. There are perfect flowers, which are both male and female at the same time. They're hermaphrodites. And then there are monoecious flowers, which are separate male and female flowers, but on the same plant. And then there are dioecious flowers. So they're one sex or the other. If we had to equate flowers to animals, it would be most animals are like this, but not most flowers are like this. There are a lot of flowers that are in these categories, flowering plants. All right, now animals. The rest of the talk is about animals, or at least principally. And so most animals are dioecious, males and females. But there are some odd assortments of other strategies. So first of all, there's what we call parthenogenic species, which is there are no males, right? So female parthenogenesis means virgin birth, so there are no males to fertilize eggs. And lizards are examples of this, and there are other animals that fall into this category, but not a lot of vertebrates. Some fish, certainly no mammals. I think that there's one species of bird that does this. But anyways, parthenogenesis is also known as asexual reproduction. This is sexual reproduction. And so these are male and female separate, right? But then in some animals, especially fish, there are hermaphrodites. And there are three kinds of hermaphrodites. This one is one, that is to say, you're both male or female and male at the same time. And so we call them simultaneously hermaphroditic or simultaneous hermaphrodites. But then in fish, there are two kinds of sequential hermaphrodites. There are those that begin as males. Pro means first, and androus means male. And then there are those that begin as females. Protogeny has to do with gyne, vagina, females. And so they're fish, like clownfish from Nemo. You may remember the father was eventually going to become a mother, which is kind of interesting. Would have made this story a lot more intriguing but confusing for kids. All right, so now, oh, by the way, I do have a question. And the question is, when would a species be protandrous, and when would a species be protogynous? Like, why would a species start out male, then become female, or female and then become male? This is a good question for an exam. Here's another good question. A lot of species, but not so much with mammals. Well, in mammals, it's size, but in other animals, it's color and other sorts of ornaments. But mostly in mammals, it's about size. Males are bigger than females. But in birds, we see a lot of different colors. Males are always more colorful than females. Fish, too, likewise. Males more colorful than females. And then some other animals, we see a lot of ornaments. Like here's a male rhinoceros beetle. Here's a female. And the question that I have for you is, well, first of all, this is called sexual dimorphism. Di meaning two, morphism having two morphologies. So there's sexually distinctive morphologies. And for some reason, in animals, it's very common for males to be more colorful, to have more ornaments, and generally to be more ostentatious than females. And that is a good question for an exam. I'm just going to say it has to do with the idea that sperm is cheap. That is to say, males don't invest a lot in any one cell of sperm, and so they're less likely to be discriminating than females. Females are going to select for bigger males, more colorful males, more ornamented males, because they are likely to be the fittest of the population. And the female is making a big investment in reproduction relative to the male. Sperm is cheap. But there are some times when males are smaller than females, and that is for, I'll just have you think about. Actually, wait a minute. I'm going to have you think about it now. So females often will, sometimes, not often, but sometimes will be bigger than males. Not very often will they be more colorful. And certainly very unusual for a female to be more ornamented. But males sometimes can be smaller than females. And it has to do with the fact that size in females can be related to, or is often related to, how many offspring the female can produce. So there'll be selection for large females, but there's often stronger selection for large males. Okay, that's enough. Take a break. This is the new subject, which is development. And so if you want to take a stretch out, I think we're at, I don't know how many minutes in, but I'm just going to keep rolling. Okay, so this slide is beginning the next subject, and that is animal development. Well, I should say development, period. I am going to focus on animals, but I am going to start with just development generally. So here's the thing you need to know. Eggs to fully form individual, that is development. There are different stages that I want you to know, and we'll talk about these stages as we go through this lecture. But I want to start by saying that animals and plants do have some similarities. Of course, both of them have zygotes, single-celled fertilized egg. And both of them will have mitotic cell division. That is, from one cell you get millions and billions and trillions of cells. But from hereafter, it's pretty distinctive. I'm just going to focus on animals. So there are two things that I want you to remember that are similar, but a lot of things that are different. And so we begin development by focusing again on animals and beginning with gametes. So those things that make the zygote. Beginning with males, actually females. Females, most eggs in mammals anyways, are produced before birth. Here's a graph that shows how many eggs are produced early on, and then as you grow, the number of eggs begins to decline significantly. There are no eggs generated before, or I should say after you're born. All your eggs are produced before. Many of them die before you're born. I think it's like half of them don't make it to childbirth. Measured in terms of volume, an egg is about 10,000 to 30,000 times larger than a sperm. Sperm is produced throughout life. So remember I said sperm is cheap. Well, yeah, relative to the amount of mass that an egg has, sperm is definitely cheap. Okay, moving on, sperm. So what do we want to know about sperm? Okay, so first thing you should remember is that eggs are large, but also eggs have everything in them. Nuclei, mitochondria, they contain everything necessary for generating new life forms. Sperm, on the other hand, are pretty much just two things. They have nucleus, and they have a flagellum for moving. And that's all I want you to remember. There's not much else that the sperm is doing. It's bringing DNA to an egg, and it has to get there. And so the flagellum is the way it moves. We'll talk about acrosomes briefly at the end of this. So a sperm, amazing enough, only about 5 to 15% of sperm are actually normal. That is to say, viable. 1 in 7 couples are infertile, and up to 40% decline in sperm concentrations in males since the 1940s. And apparently, there are all sorts of environmental factors that have contributed to changes in sperm viability over the years. Sperm travels to the egg. You gotta watch this video. This is a really good video. There's a quiz question on this video. Definitely be a test question on this video. Here is the female reproductive system. Here is the penis. The eggs are going to be produced in the ovaries, and the sperm travel up the fallopian tube and will meet up with the egg that is released into the fallopian tube, and only one sperm cell will enter and fertilize an egg, even though there might be millions of sperm cells that begin the travel up the fallopian tube. Okay, moving on. Here's an illustration. Again, the same video. This is an illustration of what's happening. I'm not really that interested in having you know what's happening during fertilization, other than to remember that only one sperm cell makes it into the cell of the female, the egg, the gamete. But many cells can make it. They just don't. They get stopped. And that's for another class, but you should know that only one cell makes it in. Of course, it has to be the way that it is. All right, so once fertilization happens, then you start getting development. And development begins with the zygote. The zygote moves to cleavage, which is the process that gives rise ultimately to a blastula. And the blastula is a collection of cells that are hollowed out and produce a blastocele. I'm not interested in you remember that. But I do want you to remember this. Like cleavage, it's like zygote starts, this is the cell, right? This is how large it is. Blastula is the same size. So there's no growth in the animal at this stage. There's just cells dividing and becoming smaller and smaller. That's the first step in fertilization that I want you to remember. And during this step right here, 8-cell stage, you can actually generate new individuals. If you pulled these cells apart, you can actually produce something like a twin or an octuplet from this collection. But after that, no. From here to here, there's a big change in terms of what is possible. An individual can be produced here, but no individual can be produced by pulling any one of these cells. And you might want to wonder why. How is that possible? In part, it has to do with the chemicals inside the cells, the factors that affect gene expression. All right, so then we go to the next step, which is called gastrulation, or the gastrula is developed. The process is gastrulation. The product is a gastrula, and the gastrula produced from this process gives rise to something that's a pretty big deal. First is we have an opening, which becomes, in humans, it becomes the anus. And then we also have 3 different germ layers starting to produce, which give rise ultimately to muscles and nerves and so forth. So we start seeing differentiation, specialization of the cells at this step in development. So we go from blastula to gastrula through the process of gastrulation. And here are some terms that you may want to remember. Up to 8 cells in mammals, cells are totipotent. That means to say that an individual can be produced from any one of those cells. Up to 32 cells are pluripotent. That means that cells can become a lot of things, but they certainly cannot become humans. Implantation in the uterus of a human occurs after the gastrula is formed. Sorry, blastula is formed. About 1 week in. And then about 4 weeks in, you get something called the neurula, which is further specialization of the gastrula. Notochord is producing the central nervous system. Notochord is kind of like the vertebral column. And then this produces a neural tube with the spinal cord, and the neural tube forms the brain and the spinal cord ultimately. So as time passes, the first thing that's starting to happen that's really becoming human is development of the nervous system. See, I don't know why the order got changed here, so I apologize for that. Gastrulation, we already talked about this. This is an illustration of gastrula. The blastula produces gastrula through gastrulation. Neurulation, okay, and then animal development overview. Well, so after the neurulation, we get something called organogenesis. And organogenesis generates all sorts of specialized structures like the muscles and the red blood cells and the lung cells and the thyroid cells, the pancreatic cells, etc. And finally, I'll leave you with this. The question that I want to have you think about it before you, as you prepare for the exam, is how is it possible that one cell gives rise to all sorts of complexity of cells? The 200 human cells, different kinds of cells, and all the tissues and all the genes that are produced in these different cells. What is going on? And that is that is actually from earlier in the semester. So you'll need to refer to notes from earlier in the semester to answer that question. Thanks.